words will come and come undone, and there's a way to have some fun without being so crazy. You evil people who would pull the strings and make us weeping instead of praying at the steeple or making love or heaven above or hell come take us down below where the governments go. Okay, what does that mean? Let me know in the comments. So here's a question. Is it ethical or okay to punish a people for their government? So is it okay to punish ordinary Russians because of the actions of, Vladimir Putin and his circle, who arguably are not particularly connected to the will of, the democratic will of the people, depending on who you believe? Or, what's happening in Gaza with all these innocent people being killed, and, lives destroyed. It just, takes a long time to build things up, and it's very easy much easier to stamp on sandcastles than to build them. And yeah, terrible things are happening, obviously. So, is it okay for the Israeli military to kind of seemingly bomb areas quite indiscriminately because, well, there's Hamas people in there and it's worth it? Look, they, hurt us. They started this. All right, so we're going in, and yeah, if it's their fault that they're among the civilians, that's their choice. That's on Hamas. Blame them, not us. But you're hurting the people, and you maybe somewhere in there it's like, well, yeah, you did vote them in. Remember that time, even though now they just hold power without elections. So it seems like on some level the Israeli military or state is punishing ordinary Palestinians for the actions of Hamas. Or is it okay for Hamas themselves to be going and murdering, what is it, like 1,300 Israelis? Not soldiers, not police, just civilians, normal people. I know Israelis. Shout out to Rafi. And they're beautiful people. I've met a bunch, I don't know, I don't know how many, but quite a few, and they seemed really cool, interesting people. Yeah, I mean, they're the same as the people who just got murdered, and so is that okay? Say, well, yeah, but your government is illegally colonizing the West Bank, or religious extremists, extreme Orthodox Jews are doing that in the West Bank, and that's your government is turning a blind eye and kind of seemingly secretly encouraging them because, well, this expands the borders of Israel, and is that legitimate to punish, to kill those Israelis, send terror through Israel, and destabilize the government in reaction to the sins of that government, or the whatever from their point of view, their grievances against the Israeli state? Or is it okay for Russia to bomb civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, and like hospitals or energy grids and stuff, as part of the war against the Ukrainian military? And you could say, you know, in total war, that was not in World War II, that was happening on all sides. But, you know, is that okay? When, you know, or should you just be sticking to the soldiers and kind of try not to hurt the people too much, even if technically civil society, of course, is a support to the military, but, you know, aren't there rules of engagement? Or, you know, America and, you know, Europe, the European Union kind of being, to a large extent, within American hegemony and kind of doing more or less whatever, you know, the elite, you know, oligarchs who secretly run the USA want, or, you know, the corporate will, you know, the snowball effect of corporate will in America, and that, you know, so that kind of Western influence, NATO and Five Eyes and all this, all the influences of, like, you know, sanctions against Iraq back, you know, in the day, creating, you know, all, like, you know, attacking Iraq, invading Afghanistan. But let's keep it simple. Say, like, sanctions against Iran now. You know, saying, like, oh, we've got sanctions because you're trying to develop nuclear energy. You say it's for civilian use, but, you know, we don't trust you, so we've got these sanctions on you, trying to, you know, basically preventing you from trading, you know, trying to strangle you economically. Now, that does hurt the government, but it hurts the people much, much more than the government. And a huge number of the people in Iran, they don't want the government. There were huge protests. There's a lot of people who, you know, got, you know, I don't know if they, probably a bunch of people lost their lives, but definitely a lot of people, you know, went to prison or had, you know, real serious problems by defying that government. Same thing in Russia, or, you know, all over the place. And so, or is it, you know, okay for, like, because if that's okay, saying, yeah, you can punish the people for what the government doing, like, hey, it's your responsibility to get rid of them. And if you're not, until you know, if you're not against them, you're with them, you know, until you overthrow your government, then, you know, you're fair game for others to attack. If that's the logic, then basically anyone, you know, in Europe or, you know, America, the USA and Canada, probably like a lot of powerful countries, are, by that logic, responsible for all kinds of heinous stuff, which, you know, the CIA and, you know, the corporatocracy, that's kind of like a parasite on the neck of Lady Liberty, of what America was until, you know, they changed its direction, taking out JFK, it seems. You know, not to, you know, make too many assumptions here, but, you know, look, if you take a fair look at the history, it seems like, you know, to shoot from the hip, that's basically what's going on. America's become a corporate zombie. But my point is that, like, America itself is a beautiful place, and the aspirations are very good, and among most people, of, like, democracy and self-sufficiency and not, you know, causing problems, trying to be a good, you know, beacon of hope and light in the world. But then there's this parasite that just wants to make money from endless wars and all this stuff, which is the corporate fusion of corporate and state power. But that elite in the West has been, you know, there's a lot of evidence that it's been, you know, causing a lot of problems around the world in undermining. Like, there's a long history of the CIA overthrowing governments in Latin America, in the Middle East, between, I think it was 1945 and 1995, was it? Like that 50-year period, I think they overthrew, like, something huge, like 100 governments, many of them democracies. It was a gigantic, like, and, you know, something like a really, really large percentage of the world's governments, like a serious, you know, if anyone else did that, we'd be like, well, they're like Hitler, you know, what are they doing? But anyway, so they did that, you know, they overthrew Iran's government in 1951, was it? Or was it 52 or 53? I think 51, maybe. Then, which was democracy, you know, first ever democracy in their thousands of years, long history. And the Americans overthrew it, or the CIA did. And then, you know, supporting the USA during the Cold War. Oh, okay, we want, you know, dictators who can support us against the Soviet Union. So Okay, yeah, and America basically, the foreign policy and that of the West as well, by extension, was NATO, which USA dominates, and also but yeah, like uh, it was to support these dictators who really suppressed democracy in their own countries. So to for the triumph of democracy around the world, allegedly, all these dictators were supported, and so that caused a lot, and then that actually led to the rise of Islamism and the desire where people were like, okay, the democratic movements or socialist movements have been suppressed. Okay, what else can we do? And then some people said, well, it's all we need Islam, in politics. We need a fusion of Islam, religion, and politics. Get rid of the separation of church and state, and extreme kind of jihadi kind of movements became much more common. And then now look, that's plaguing the whole Middle East, and making it much harder for Islam to kind of temper some of its more extreme kind of elements, like views towards homosexuality or women or whatever, or other religions for that matter, like to entertain the possibility that there's other ways up the holy mountain. And so that's some really serious damage that the West has done there. Am I responsible for that? Is any English speaking native who's listening to this responsible? And is it okay for some terrorists to come kill us because of what the CIA and these cronies trying to rule the world have been up to? I don't think so. So I think we need and the thing is, the people of the world, we have so much more in common with each other than we do with any of our governments. The difference between us and our government is a much broader gulf. It's a much bigger difference than between us and anyone from some other culture who is also just a kind of regular person, not with no hand on the reins of state power. For the vast majority of the time, that's the case, And I teach English, and so I've met a lot of people like through teaching online, like so people from all over the world have been teaching, and then through in-person classes, like people from all over the world will be there, and so it's kind of like I'm traveling because I'm constantly coming in contact with people from different countries, and everyone's cool, everyone's really nice, and yeah, there's differences. A minority of people are a bit weird in every culture, and a minority of people are really, really, really special in every culture. And then most of us are just somewhere in the middle, bit weird, bit special, or that's cool. Not everyone can be the most interesting people, or the weirdest, scariest people, whatever. But there's a spectrum, and it's all part of us. Ultimately, we're all one here. We're just different branches on the one tree. It's the beautiful thing. Side note: when you see someone who's like, well, you really overshadow me, like you make me look kind of like less impressive, to be honest. There's an invitation to understand that they're not particularly responsible for that. That's God fruiting and flowing through them. And that is also, that same force is flowing through you, but just perhaps in a less impressive way right now. But you can understand that actually you are that other person, and that what makes you are equally virtuous and merit-worthy of what they have there at the core, basic level. Basically, more or less. I think this is true, that yes, we can't all be the most interesting, although there's so many things to do in life that you can be the best at something, that's the cool thing. Just find what your game, and then you can master that niche, but yeah, there's this spectrum of people, and some people are really interesting, and we can enjoy their thing, abilities, and just kind of try to admire them and kind of encourage that within ourselves, and be as good as we can be, and not be jealous of anyone who's successful, and just take it as inspirational and beautiful, and even see that is us living another life, and we can enjoy that triumph in our own self. And also to the same thing with bad people, to understand, quote unquote bad people, to understand that, yeah, that's part of us too, and that's something we have to accept, and we have to do our best to be inspired or cautioned, I guess, by that, to be like, oh, okay, there's surely, what within me, what among my least, useful instincts, and least harmonious and least wise instincts, what among those instincts, is this example of this kind of person who's not a bit this dark character? What are they? In what way am I doing the same thing? And what are my lower instincts? Could I kind of channel this energy and take this as a cautionary tale to work on myself? So anyway, side note complete. That there's a range of people and we can learn things from that. But the point is, basically everyone's cool, and it doesn't matter what culture you're from. There are differences. It's like a collective personality. In general, people from Asian cultures are more collectivist and focused on the group. People from, say, Latin America are generally more like loosey-goosey, relaxed and talkative. And, there are these differences, but then any individual within that could totally defy the pattern, but it's just a general pattern that's there. So there are differences between cultures, but everyone's cool, and everyone gets on well, and it's really beautiful, like seeing that. It's kind of world peace in the classroom when you have all these Russians and Ukrainians chatting, and Chinese and Taiwanese, and everyone's talking, and there might be little moments where it's a bit awkward, but it's like it's all good, and so we're all one. We're all just the people, and it's so throughout history, and even right now, there's so many cases where the people are being punished for the actions of governments. But governments, even in so-called democracies, these days basically like fascism. It's not really connected to the will of the people. In all the Anglosphere, all the English-speaking countries, the governments are basically beholden to BlackRock, Vanguard, these huge or corporate interests. To a very large extent, these interests control election campaign funding, and so they control the politicians who choose the bureaucrats, who choose the judges. So over time, these forces are continuous. The CEOs may change, the shareholders may change a bit, but these corporate forces have been there as a constant pressure, selective pressure, for decades, and they want to make money. That's all they really want to do. And that can be very healthy when it's in balance, and it will be healthy when we rebalance things, and we'll be very grateful for it, and we can remain grateful for them even now while they're causing trouble. But the point is, the grown-ups in the room need to go, okay, well, look, this is out of balance. And the fact is, the desire for money and the power of corporations, it has purchased the government, basically. But the government is not meant to be part of the market. The government is, and that's why it shouldn't be too big also. Less incentive to try to get control of it and buy it through illicit means. But, keep it kind of lean so it's just, easier to keep independent. But among other benefits of that, but like lower taxes. But in any case, governments, USA, very, Republican or Democrat, they both want war. They both support big pharma, rolling out these barely tested products and, showing very little interest in health, no recommendation of vitamin D during COVID, but it's just, take these, expensive new products we've developed. And don't worry about those cheap alternative medications which seem to show promise. Let's suppress them. Like, whoa, interesting. It almost seems like money is the only real driving force here. Almost seems like that, censors at YouTube. And then, say the European Union, actually the democratic representatives, the MEPs, members of the European Parliament that we vote in, they don't have the power to make the laws. They have. I need to look into this. I should definitely be more aware of this. There's a lot to be aware of these days, but I believe they have an oversight function, but they can't veto or cancel law. Like they don't control the process. Basically, unelected bureaucrats are making the law, and there's like an advisory function or amendment function of these democratically elected representatives who are themselves are subject to the same corporate capture forces. But even in that, to a very large extent, it's like a fascist system where it's capitalism, property rights, So using the engine of the free market, even though it's heavily socialist at this point, but you're using capitalism to some extent to have that productivity, but then you're controlling it through the government just being able to interfere in the economy and kind of being above the law and being able to do what it wants. And so, yeah, like a corporate, a fusion of corporate and state power. And that's basically what the European Union is, which is very ironic given that basically fascism has won in Europe. And the people who, and me saying that, someone would call me, oh, right wing, fascist, whatever. It's like, you realize, like, you're the fascist. Like, this is insane. This is crazy. But anyway, like fascism not being the same as Nazism. Nazism is fascism with racism thrown in, Germanic supremacy specifically. But, Mussolini and Franco and, all kinds of people all over the place, they had fascism as well. And, China right now is fascist technically because they're not communist. They have they have capitalism. North Korea is communist. They don't have capitalism. But, China has capitalism, but the government can just do whatever they want, take your property at the drop of a hat. So that's fascism in the classical definition. Anyway, so, in these countries where we are, we, even in democracies, so to speak, if people really wake up, then we can, I believe at this point, exert a pressure to take back control of the system. Through elections, I don't think they're manipulating elections to that much that they could stop that, although it is possible that the whole thing's a fraud. But I think probably there's a little bit of fraud, just enough so they can control things. They don't want to be too obvious. But at the moment, not enough people are really paying attention, so they don't need that much. So I believe the system is technically amenable to that change if we had a very rapid awakening, which seems to be happening, happily. Anyway, but at present, not enough people are paying attention. So basically the system, is thwarted and controlled by these corporate interests, and people basically don't have control over it, and there's enough people who aren't paying attention, and maybe they're very busy and, perhaps accidentally, I don't know, there's all these policies from on high which crush the middle class and actually make it very easy to make money if you're already very rich, but very hard to make money if you're already poor or even in the middle of the road. And just during COVID, the whole middle class in the industrialized world got crushed and shrunk while the billionaire class ballooned. And it's just the people, the government policies just so happen to help the people who are funding the election campaigns of the politicians, and, the NGOs which control, have large influence on universities and journalism and big industry and the bureaucracies and, even the judiciary. Very interesting. But so much to say that even in the democratic world, people don't really have control of the governments. Governments are basically gone rogue. And so to punish the people for the actions of the government just seems unfair on the face of it. And then most of the world is not even pretending to be democratic, Well, I'm not sure for most, but there's a very large amount of the world where it's like, maybe, yeah, but there's a lot of the world where it's, it's very clear people don't believe it's democracy. So if the part of the world where people believe it's democracy, and, in reality, I don't think it is. Switzerland, maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe that is a functional democracy still, because it's direct democracy. They can make petitions for referenda. If they have enough votes, then it goes there's a referendum, and if enough people vote for it, then that's the law. You don't need the politicians. And so if the politicians try to get voted in on a certain promise, and then they flip and they betray that promise, the people can just go, oh, okay, well, we're going to make a petition to do the opposite of what you're trying to do now, and then the politician just gets stuffed. They can't do anything, and of course they're not going to get voted back in, and so of course they wouldn't even try it in the first place. So they probably have, I'm sure they have these mechanisms, but it's more sneaky. But yeah, probably more democratic, probably still functional democracy in Switzerland, I would guess. But anyway, there's the democratic, there's the part of the world that believes it's democratic still, but it's really not. And then probably maybe the largest chunk of the world is pretending to be democracies, but everyone knows they're not, including, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is not, no one believes that's a democracy. And then you've got another part of the world, probably a minority, I guess, where, they're upfront about, Iran or China. It's like, no, we run the thing. That's how it works, Saudi Arabia, etc. So UAE, these Arab monarchies. But so anyway, we're going to punish the people for the actions of governments. And throughout history, there's been people name the worst crimes and criminals who committed them through time. Oh, you have serial killers, like you have Jack the Ripper. You have this person killed 20 women or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's horrendous, And this person, a mass shooter, killed 30 people, kids, and you're like, wow, that's terrible, Do you remember any mass shooters killing like 1 million people, like the 1 million people who died during the invasion of Iraq, or 6 million people, like the Holocaust, or 1 in 7 Russians during World War II when they defeated Nazi Germany for us? We, the English-speaking world, although the Western allies actually did very little in World War II. The policy was basically to let Russia do most of the legwork because it was on their turf. They had no choice. They were already doing it. So just let them at it, and then we would have an advantage over them at the end. And the British Empire was kind of crumbling, so they're trying to just hold on there. So that was the choice they made. Anyway, so thank you, Russia, for that. And 1 in 7 Russians dead, but then under Stalin, I think was it 60 million? No, 30 million, I think, people got killed. Under Mao, I think it was 60 million, they think, in China, enormous numbers of dead. Khmer in Cambodia, what the Khmer Rouge did, they took the most advanced, most anciently illustrious society, the site of Angkor Wat and, the Khmer Empire, this Buddhist, flourishing state, which had, in like the year 1500 or something, Angkor had a bigger population than London, it was really advanced. And Cambodia was the most advanced Asian society, I believe, up until the mid 20th century. I believe more than Japan. I'm not sure. And they, the communist just, government came in and just, said, oh, we're going back to year 0, everyone's going to be peasants. It's going to be much better. By the way, anyone with glasses, yeah, you're part of the bourgeoisie enemy, and they killed everyone. And then, the whole thing fell apart, and, all the worst crimes throughout history have been committed by governments. And now that doesn't mean the people should go and, overthrow all our governments in some chaotic frenzy. But it does mean we should be aware who the real greatest threat is. Governments are constantly talking about all these threats, and, the danger of this, the danger of that. Oh, we need to control things. Yeah. Have you read a history book? Who are the greatest threats? Governments are happy to talk about the threat of other governments. But what about government per se? What about a global conference not on like the dangers of global boiling and, manipulating scientific data to make everyone terrified of, climate change? Although climate change has always been happening, and it's a question that needs to be investigated more of like, to what extent are humans affecting it? Because that's not a closed case from what I understand from looking into it fairly deeply, and all these other issues, war on terror, Israel, Palestine, or Ukraine, constant, COVID, constant just fear and threats. And, what about a global conference on the danger of government overreach? Just the dangers of government. How dangerous are governments? Let's get all the governments together and talk about it. Not about pointing fingers at each other, although that would be part of it, but just talking about government in general, given that throughout history, governments have been the number one criminal committing all the atrocities. That's dwarf scales are like orders of magnitude greater than crimes of any individuals or gangs even. So I look forward to that conference. That'd be very interesting. But the point is, in the meantime, I think we, the people, should be aware that, like, don't get distracted. Don't get pulled into World War III by, let's go bomb Israel, or let's go bomb Palestine, or Ukraine, or Russia. It's like, okay, peace, wave the white flag, spiritual surrender, be at peace within, and try to encourage peace without, through seeing yourself in all of us and understanding we're all, just like this little plant behind me, Bodhi, many branches, one plant. And so we're all branches on the same tree, and tree of life. And that's a beautiful thing. And we should kind of celebrate, our connections, and not be so afraid of each other, or, frustrated with each other. And a lot of the divisions between peoples have been caused by the governments, not by the people in general. So we need to understand, like I used to teach these Russians, the really cool boy, Kirill, and I loved teaching him, but then I had to end the classes because, the sanctions came in. And so, okay, we can't, a lot of, basically, the family, their business, was badly affected because, these international financial, transaction networks were closed down for Russia. So that affected certain, the trade the father was doing. And so it's like, okay, we can't have the classes. So like, so that Kirill, is he responsible for the invasion of Ukraine? Is that what's happening? It's like, no, all right. And that's just like a tiny drop in the bucket. Like, there's so much harm coming to all the world on all sides from the actions of governments. And we, the people, our responsibility is, and our guilt is to understand that we have been, in many, many, many cases, getting tricked into thinking that other peoples are the at fault. But actually, no, it's other governments. It's not other peoples. It's not the normal people. Yes, once there's a war, of course, it's tribal instinct for people to rally around the group, because often people get confused between the difference between their state and their country. Like, this is Ireland, and then this is the Irish state. Like during the Civil War, there were two states. There was, the IRA, and there was the Free State, and they were fighting for control. So there's two governments fighting for control of the island, and so, you can have a state is a group of people and organizations, institutions, but basically a network of people running the place. But the country is much bigger than the government, and they're different things. And often the people don't even like the government, or the government don't like the people. And So, we should be aware that we keep mistaking, so the people, if they rally, if Vladimir Putin's approval rating is very high at the moment, but I think part of that is because Russians understand that the war in Ukraine wasn't unprovoked, which is this lie that's put out in the West. It was provoked. Doesn't mean it was right, but it definitely was provoked, And, the Minsk Accords, you look at the Maidan, the coup the CIA launched in 2014 against the democratically elected government of Ukraine, NATO expansion, breaking their promises after the reunification of East Germany. There's, yada, yada, yada. It goes on and on. So, partly it's that. I think they understand that, we're subject to lies and this isn't fair. They're making us look bad. Like as if we're the bad guys here. But, what about the American empire that, invades countries, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, or supporting, the Saudis, Afghanistan, Syria, where else? Like Iraq, Vietnam, but even more recently, Yugoslavia, on and on, And that's okay. They can do it. But no, not Russia. Baddies. And so I think part of them, they're like rallying around, like, no, this isn't fair. But then also I think it's just this general tribal instinct where people in danger, you get your critical thinking capacity decreases. And you just want to grind down and just put your backs together. And, it's a more reptilian brain takes over. So just more primal, So naturally people, okay, Russia, that's it. One word, Russia. They're not thinking, they want to keep it simple. Survival instincts kicking in. And also there's the whole thing of, like we're saying, people get confused about the difference between their government and the people. And so, oh, you're attacking, and then it's especially hard when, people in Europe or America or whatever saying, yeah, Russia has done this. And then some random Russian guy who might have, been like, Putin's an idiot. And he's like, what? Russia? You're talking about me, And then so you're pushing them into the arms of the government, and which suits the government fine. Like, yeah, great. Yeah, they're attacking us. Not just the government for what we have done. So I think all around the world, there's a few things that need to happen for us to rebalance the world. But I think one of the big things is for people to realize that it's wrong to punish peoples for the actions of their governments. And that actually the people of the world, we all have so much in common, and our interests, our goals, our dreams are very much aligned. There are differences, but we've got so much room of overlap where we agree. So we can just get started with that. And then, 50 years down the line, we can start getting to work on the things that we disagree on, But like for now, like for our lifetimes, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We got plenty of stuff we all agree on and we can put into action, which will be firmly, fiercely resisted by governments in all of our countries, because it's going to take away their power. But we should take away their power. They're abusing their power. It's illegitimate, unearned authority. They've overstepped their mark, and they've overplayed their hand in recent history, I would say as well. But and so I think this is what's happening. And I think we should have compassion and not be like, they are the people too. The people in the government, to some extent, in one level, they're part of the people, but they can rejoin the people in a spiritual sense more deeply by kind of defecting from this parasite and saying, no, that's not right, and working within the system to kind of bring it to heel and bring it into legitimate authority rather than the overstepped, rogue authority it's, kind of claiming now. Or defecting and kind of working from the outside as whistleblowers or activists or whatever. But or at least just to be inside there and to, kind of put up an extremely weak defense while the people kind of make the charge to take over. And we all need to understand, again, we're all in this together. There are no enemies ultimately. It's just we're even people who think that they are our enemies. Like, no, the people, they don't understand. They're trying to take over. We need to prevent them. Misinformation. It's like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's like, a little child who's like, I don't want to go to bed. I hate you. And you're like, you don't go, oh my God, my child hates me. You're like, oh yeah, it's okay. Come on, off to bed. Here you go. And 5 minutes later, the child's going to be cuddling you, and your love was strong enough to be there every second of the journey so that they could come back to love and to their true self out of that daydream nightmare of like, much sooner. And so that's our challenge and our opportunity with our brothers and sisters in this, working within this parasitic government, these parasitic governments, which around the world are causing far more harm than good in most cases, probably in all cases, in most cases, let's say. But anyway, so that's it. Let's try to stop being like, oh, Russia's doing this, China's doing this. Okay, the Chinese, we can use that as a shorthand, but we need to be aware. It's like saying Washington did this. It's like, whoa, Washington has a mind? I knew all that Masonic pentagrams on the streets was doing something. It's like a neural pathways. It's a circuit. No, it's a metaphor. It's the Russian government are doing this, the Chinese government, the American government, the Honduran government, El Salvadoran government, whatever, Argentinian government. And so, yeah, we can understand that we're all together and we need to reclaim our control over our governments and assert our sovereignty, and that we are a key part of that is not getting distracted by divisions which are sown by governments saying, oh, look over there, they're trying to do that. Like, that's cute. Yeah, nice. Okay, we're still coming for, to lower taxes by 80% and take away your budget by 80% and, reduce regulations by 80% and just have, a fair system which is safe for people in the environment, etc. But basically you can do what you want and, you work, you keep the fruits of your labor. Government's there, to support people in extreme situations, but government's not meant to be everywhere. You're meant to be it's meant to be so that you can go through your life and basically not think about the government until, for the vast majority of the days. And be like, oh yeah, there's the government. I forgot about them. That's the ideal, right? It's just the people. The space, government is so in our face these days all over the world. In China, for example, it's much more extreme because it's much more totalitarian and the social credit score, surveillance kind of system and all that. But in all countries, it's like this. The government, the state is expanding and it's more and more in our face all the time. But the space left by government, the space that is left where government used to be, will be filled by the people. We the people, Isn't that's a beautiful thought I'll leave you with, like that. As much as governments are so, involved in our lives every day and just kind of weaseling their way into every nook and cranny and just, all up in our space, that space should be vacated by the government and the people. Just the communal weaving and interflowing of sovereign people in a law-abiding system, just, cooperating, competing, playing, expressing, experiencing. And so, sounds fun. So, that's it. And prayers and compassion to all those victims of governments around the world at the moment, and compassion also to the perpetrators, the governments, those in government perpetrating these crimes, because we are both of them. So let's try to be the best we can. Spread the love. All right, everyone, that's it. See ya.